of trust.
He's really good. He doesn't.
Okay, testing. Okay, we're good. Yeah.
He's just going on, but it's not in book.
I know.
That's okay. It's really good.
Okay, so we are starting chapter 26 today, and this is really a new section, a new subject that we're going to start today, and it's
45, right?
yes, and we're going to be spending the next 9 chapters on joy. Now, it's not all going to sound like joy, because, as we'll soon see, other things contribute to joy. And in order to understand and experience joy properly, we have to understand the other side as well. So, but at the same time, this is going to be the gist of the next 9 chapters. So, why? I'm sure everyone here has experienced at least a day of joy, or you've experienced joy, and I'm sure you all have something you can point to as the happiest day of your life, or one of the happy. If you had 3 kids, you're not going to say which one was the happiest one, but in hindsight, you may say that. But at the time, I don't know if you could say that. But have you ever asked yourself, why should I be happy? Have you ever asked yourself that question?
Of course.
Yeah.
Why should I be happy? Because it's better than being a dope.
Okay, very good. So is that just a gift? Have you ever sat down and thought about that, or that's just so obvious you never even thought about it?
Never thought much more than that.
Than that. Okay, perfect. But that's a good reason to be happy.
Don't
Okay.
want to be happy.
Is there another reason you've ever thought of to be
Is that
happy?
the same as why do I deserve to be happy? Is that the same?
No. Why should I be happy? In other words, the premise of why do I deserve to be happy is that I should be happy, and the question is, why do I deserve to be happy? But have you ever asked yourself why is that something you should deserve? In other words, you don't ask yourself, why do I deserve to be miserable?
Yeah, well, I asked that very question.
Deserve or what?
No, yeah. Why are they putting this on me now?
I know, but you don't. That's an afterthought. The question is, if you're looking to be happy and you're holding yourself back, you're going to ask the question, well, why should I assume I should be? In other words, why would I deserve to be happy? You're not looking to be miserable. You want to know after the fact, why did I get this? What did I do to deserve this? What did I? In other words, when you're miserable, you say, what did I do to deserve this? When you're happy, you say, what can I do to deserve this? But why should you be happy? So you said something. You said a logical answer. Is there some other thought that someone has? Why?
I just thought maybe you look around yourself and you see everything that you're thankful for, and that gives you joy. It says, oh, look at all everything around me that I'm grateful for.
In other words, if you're not happy, in a way, you're a little delusional as to what you're going through and the amount of blessings you do have. Even if you do have a lot of negative things as well, there's a lot of positive that you have, and you're avoiding that or ignoring that. Any answer you'll give as to why you should be happy is probably correct, right?
You have to really look at, don't you? What would make me happy?
Yeah, but before you look, we'll get to that question too. But the only way you're going to look for something to make you happy is if you think there's a good reason to be happy.
Okay.
If you don't think there's a reason to be miserable, you're not going to look for ways to get you miserable. You're only going to look for ways to make you happy if you think being happy is good. So, I mean, obviously, just the basics. Like we associate joy with life, right? When you look at someone who's smiling, who's happy, you call them, that's a lively person. That's someone who's alive. You look at someone who's down and depressed all day, you say, what type of life is that, right? Like almost that's not a life. So we associate life with happiness. Even we discussed Sukkot a few times. The default status of a person is happiness. I mean, when a child's born, their default is happy. When they're sad, you wonder, why are they sad? They should be happy. And children, they say, smile and laugh hundreds of times a day. Adults, not hundreds. Sometimes not even tens of times a day. But there's something changes. In other words, there's the default, and then there is. So why should we be happy? Now, Tanya is going to ask this question because Tanya is coming to address a different element. If Tanya would say, why should I be happy? Everyone knows why you should be happy. What do you mean? If you want to live, if you want to be beneficial to others, you want to be beneficial to yourself, be happy. But Tanya is coming from a place, as we started studying the Tanya, how to make serving God accessible, right? In your mouth and your heart, and to do it. So in other words, Tanya is concerned about serving God. And the question is, when it comes to serving God, is happiness also vital? Important? Why should it, if you assume it's important, why? Some people might even think that in order to serve God properly, you really shouldn't focus on happiness, because we tend to associate happiness with doing whatever you want, or not necessarily being obedient or subservient. We tend to associate an obedient person as someone who's like squeezed and even if not depressed, but like very serious and not very happy. Solemn. So if we're looking for, and by the way, for most of Jewish history, most people, even today, many religious Jews are not the happiest. When you look at them, they don't project joy and happiness. However, we know that the Torah says, "Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha," serve God with joy. Hasidim were always called the happy ones. That's how their opponents would refer to them, as the happy ones, the jolly ones. Yeah? But really, it's part of the Torah. The Torah says you got, and we'll soon see, it's such a serious part of the Torah that it becomes a focal point here in Tanya. So why, as our question, when I'm going to ask the question, why should I be happy? It's not in general in life why I should be happy. That we all instinctively know. Some of you may have not really ever asked the question in that formula because it's so simple, it's so obvious, it's not even a question. The Alter Rebbe is going to ask the question here, well, even if not verbally asked, the Alter Rebbe is going to address the question from a different perspective, not from a life perspective, but from a Jewish life perspective, from a perspective of serving God. Why is it so important? Why is it necessary? So, just to recap, very briefly, the Alter Rebbe laid out that a person has a struggle. Two souls, a struggle. You can either end up a tzaddik, a rasha, or a beinoni. Yeah. How do you end up winning the struggle? So if you're a tzaddik, that's simple. The Alter Rebbe doesn't discuss exactly what the path. This is a book of beinonim. It's not a book of tzaddikim, so we don't know what the service of a tzaddik looks like. How do you become a beinoni? So two ways, two paths the Alter Rebbe gave us. One is meditation, because the mind controls the heart. Proper meditation, you'll be able to control whatever it is you feel and do. And if you can't go through meditation, then just remember the innate love, the natural love of God that a Jew is created with a soul, Jew is born with. Every Jew has that. We can prove it. Just remind yourself of that, and you'll be able to overcome any challenge. Okay? That should be the end of it. And yet, does the stronger or better team always win? Nope. Does the more talented debater always win the debate? They might lose the debate even if they're right, because when debate is won, not always. Points aren't always given. At least in debates that go on for teenagers in college, you win a lot of points by the way you present it, by the tone of voice, so a lot of it, you can have the best argument, you'll lose the debate if you don't play it properly. So just because we have the tools and we know the formula, you want to win the argument, employ your mind. We know the formula. Just because you're the strongest doesn't mean you'll win. No. So if two people are fighting against each other and one is weaker, and we're saying now that the stronger doesn't always win, so how could the weaker one win? He knows he's weaker. Yeah. So why he's entering the fight, or he's forced into the fight. What is the way? What is the tool he can use that gives him a chance at winning.
Strategy. Better strategy than the opponent.
And let's say he's not smart enough to create strategy. He's a simple guy that was thrown into the arena.
Lucky punch.
Lucky, huh?
Step one is believing it's possible.
Oh,
Not giving up.
not, oh. In other words, and that is related to joy, to happiness. It has to do with determination and with when someone is the stronger one, and by a wide margin, when they walk into a fight, they might not think they need to, they might feel complacent. They might feel that they don't need to muster all their energy. Or they might be lazy to get into, they're not in the mood today in fighting. If they're not in the mood and you're not playing your best game, you're easily defeatable. Well, not easily, you need someone with determination to defeat you, because at the end of the day, you're strong. But with enough determination and enough positive energy, you can defeat the stronger party. So when we're dealing with our souls, sure, we can employ meditation. We can employ we can awaken, we can remind ourselves of the hidden love that exists. We're the stronger party. But what if we wake up one day and we're just not in the mood? You can have all the facts on your side. You're not going to win the debate. You're not going to win the fight. So joy is necessary for serving God, because again, you could learn chapters 1 through 25. You could be in the best position strategically. But if you wake up one morning and you're not in the mood of getting out of bed, the strategy is out the window. The strategy means nothing.
You, unless you're getting to it, you said 2 ways to become a Beinoni. First one was meditation. What's the second one?
That was chapters 18 through 24, 25, to remind yourself of the hidden love, the natural hidden love that a Jew has, that he's willing to give up his life even for idolatry. And if he's willing to do that, he should be willing to give up his life for any mitzvah. And especially if you're not being asked to give up your life, you're just asked to give up a few minutes of sleep or a little bit of comfort, of course a Jew should be willing to do that. Again, that's not a transformative thing, because that's not something you can necessarily employ at any time, and that's not something that changes you. Meditation can change you. Enough meditation, you can change the way you think. It's difficult to change the way you think, but you can change. You can change the place you go to when you're triggered to think. The way your mind works is much more difficult. That really a person today can't change. Well, you could, but it's not asked. It's not expected of a person to change the way they think. That we discussed already in chapters 3 and 4. Where we discussed that the main point is to change the garments. You can't really change the soul. You can change the garments. Thought. You can, in other words, if you're a negative thinking person, naturally you could train your mind to think positive, even though the default position is negative. You could still train your mind to think in thought positive, even if anyway. The same. Right, the same thing is in the opposite. If Judaism is not joyful, you're not going to attract anyone. You're not going to. If someone who's not doesn't do a mitzvah, isn't observant, sees an observant Jew, and they look like the most sad and depressed person, that doesn't look very attractive to come close to God, to see that type of sadness and yeah. There's a Hebrew quote that goes, Earl, you know Hebrew a little. Lo hamenatzeach sameach. It's not the victor that's happy. Ela hasameach menatzeach. The happy is victorious. You know, happiness is what leads to victory. Now, there is a truth to happiness being the result of good choices and good behavior. Okay, that does lead, but happiness is also something that we have to create and employ if we want to make those right choices. If we want to take ourselves out of those possibly crippling situations. Let's see how the Alter Rebbe addresses and introduces us to this subject on the inside. Chapter 26, page 351. But this must be made known as a cardinal principle. It is with the service of God, just as it is with a victory over a physical opponent. For instance, two people who wrestle with each other, each striving to fell the other. If one of them is lazy and sluggish, he will easily be defeated and will fall, even if he be stronger than the other, since his laziness and sluggishness prevents him from revealing his strength. Right? He's not using his full strength. Similarly, with the conquest of one's evil nature, it is impossible to conquer the evil nature with laziness and sluggishness, which stem from sadness and a stone-like dullness of the heart, but rather with alacrity, which derives from joy and an open, in other words, responsive heart that is unblemished by any trace of worry and sadness in the world. Now that's pretty big, and it is not laced, is unblemished with any trace of worry and sadness in the world. That's a pretty high mark to get to. But let's see how the Alter Rebbe develops this. The point Alter Rebbe is making is that if you think you can live an observant life, an observant means not just that you observe, but that you submit yourself to God's will. If you think you can do that without joy and happiness, you're delusional. Because there is another soul that's fighting you, and if he detects laziness, he's going to jump. There is a story of the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, whom I'm named after. He lived in Russia during the time of the Kantonistan. You've heard of that? Kantonistan was you've heard of it, you may not know the Russian word for it, but the Kantonistan was a time period where the Tsar wanted to get rid of Jews, but he knew killing them wouldn't work, so they started drafting Jewish kids into the army, and it was a forced 25-year service. Now, the service started when they were kids, so to indoctrinate them, they were taken as little kids, 8, 9 years old, and there was a quota from each Jewish community how many kids had to be taken to this draft. And unfortunately, some of them, the suffering and the torture was too much and either converted but most of these kids, or many of these kids, survived intact. They were clueless. They knew nothing about Judaism. They didn't know necessarily how to do anything, but they knew they were Jews. They wouldn't convert, and they suffered because of it. They were tortured. But they survived. But it was during this time when this decree came out. Later was when the Tsar realized the resolve of these kids, and that they would when he would approach them to convince them to convert, they would laugh at him in his face. At a certain point, it became too humiliating for him, and he rescinded the decree. Or it may have been his son, the next Tsar. I don't remember the names, but that wrote off the decree because they realized that it wasn't doing it, the damage that they wanted to. But during this time, the Tzemach Tzedek, he was very despondent. He was very down because this was a terrible, terrible decree against the Jewish people. Anyhow, once he was invited to speak to a group of these soldiers, these Kantonistan, they were traveling through town, whatever, on one of their missions, and they asked the Rebbe if he could come and address them, speak to them. So they came, and before he came, they cleaned their barracks. They cleaned their, and when the Rebbe came, they told him that they cleaned the place with sand and water. They cleaned it for the Rebbe's honor. So the Rebbe said that just like in physically, you clean a surface with sand and water, so to spiritually, you clean your soul with sand and water. What's sand and water? So sand is the recitation of Psalms, and water is tears, the tears that come from praying to God. So the soldiers turned to the Rebbe and they said, Rebbe, they taught us in the army that you don't conquer a city with tears. You conquer it with with a joyous march. And the Rebbe's whole demeanor changed. His whole attitude shifted. Up until that point, he was very, very sad demeanor over him. And that changes when he saw the resolve and the attitude of these soldiers, his everything changed. Because why do they teach you that in the army? Could you imagine going in the army and you're sad and depressed? Or you're excited to go and be victorious? Those are two different outcomes to expect. Okay, but in order to talk about joy, we have to talk about the other side. We have to talk about sadness. Depression is not, although the Hebrew word that's used here is depression, it's really not. It's like he translates it here as bitterness. It's really a whole, it includes a whole category of negative emotions. What would be some negative emotions you would include if I were to say that if you had these emotions or you had these feelings, don't go to battle. Don't get into the ring. Fear, depression, worry, anger, right? Anger.
Does it say that in the Torah? One of the reasons if a person gets married or he doesn't have that wherewithal to stand up against
Going to war.
Yeah, going to war.
Absolutely. No, so what is included in that? It will be disappointment, if someone gives up hope, if someone is broken, bitter, depressed, or mourning, which is, sort of the valid type of negative emotion. It's even a Torah mandated negative emotion. So we'll soon see how that fits in. But this is, the Alter Rebbe is going to, some of these negative emotions are going to be necessary at times, sometimes even mandated. So we have to understand what exactly these negative emotions are and what their places in our life if we want to approach the service of God with joy. Yeah. Think about the cycle of the year. Are all the holidays and all the Jewish days in the calendars happy and joyful? What are examples of days that aren't? Tisha B'Av. The whole month of Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, they're not sad, but it's a very serious time. There are other fast days during the year that are set, that we remember sad events. And then in a personal life, like we said, mourning. The Torah mandates to mourn, to be sad. Don't go to work and try to take your mind off of what's making you sad. Be sad. So the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us that when sadness is mandated, it's not an end in and of itself. If you ever need to experience a negative emotion, it can only be if it's for the purpose of advancing joy and happiness, a positive emotion. How could that be? How could it be that sadness, the purpose of sadness would be to build joy? So think about it. If you're in a bad marriage, right, the only way, and there's no way of making it happy. The only way to get into a happy marriage is how? Get a divorce, right? If you're in a miserable job, the only way to get to a better job is by quitting, is by leaving, right? So sometimes the only way to build a beautiful building, if there's a rundown building in its place, is by breaking it down. So breaking something, and that's really what's happening when you have a certain sadness, a certain a mourning, a certain you're getting over something negative that was in order to build something more positive. The only way to do that is by breaking it, is by getting rid of it. And that is a negative feeling, especially if it's something that became part of you. You're getting rid of a part of you. That could be, but if it's for the purpose of building something more beautiful and better, then that feeds into the joy, even if at the moment it is clothed and seems Yeah. For someone to get better, they need to have a surgery. Yeah. That's not something you want to. You take medication. Some medication literally eats up at your body. You have to do it in a controlled way, but why are you doing that? You're breaking it in order to rebuild a healthier cells, a healthier body. So now the Alter Rebbe is going to teach us a verse. If you look here, on page 352, it's in the middle paragraph where we're holding, but I want to go in the Hebrew. In this Tanya, it's going to be right here. This is a abbreviation. It's a no. How do you say it? How do you say Rashi Tevot in English? I'm blanking. Abbreviation. And as for the verse, and what is written, B'chol etzev yiyeh motar. Now, if you take out the vowels, yeah, it would read B'chol etzev, in every sadness, yiyeh mutar would be permitted, right? But that's not the vowels. The vowels isn't that every sadness is permitted. It says B'chol etzev, every sadness, yiyeh, future tense, motar. You know what motar means with cholam, like it's almost like leftovers. Or in other words, there's an advantage. There's even leftovers. There's something better will come, but when will the better come? Not that the sadness itself is advantageous. It's only advantageous because it will give you something more afterwards.
Like excess.
Yes. So as for the verse, in every sadness there will be profit, which means that some profit and advantage would be derived from it. The wording, there will be profit, implies that on the contrary, the sadness itself has no virtue, except that some profit will ultimately be derived from it.
So you're translated as there will be profit, and here it's translated as there there is profit.
There it says there is profit.
There is profit.
So
Yeah.
Okay. So and what does it say right after that?
Which means that some profit and advantage would be derived from it.
Okay, so the technically you could read the word like that, the verse like that, but yihiyah it is future tense. Yeah, I think if you read the verse simply, in other words, when you do that, it doesn't necessarily have to be future. It could be that there's benefit now too, but so the meaning of the verse or the implication of the verse doesn't have to be in the future, but the word that's used is future.
So try to summarize is if you have sadness now, you will have the profit or the reward.
Not necessarily. If you have sadness, you may just be sad. The only permission to have sadness now is if there will be profit from it. So if you find yourself getting into a sadness and you don't see the good result that could come because of the sadness, not after the sadness. No, it's not enough that I'll say, today I'll be sad, but tomorrow something big's happening, I'll be happy. That's not good enough because then the sadness again feeds no purpose. But if you find yourself in a position of sadness, but you know that because being sad now will make me happier tomorrow, now you've got a benefit. That doesn't mean the sadness in and of itself is a good thing. Sadness by itself is not a good thing, but it can be used for a good thing. And if it can be used for a good thing, then it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. Nuclear power, when it was first found, wasn't looked at as a good thing. But was it really a not good thing? No, it's a part of the world. Okay. We just have to find a good use for it to make it be perceived as a good thing. And I'm not saying that the ultimate result justifies, but the sadness, if there is something beneficial that can come out of it, then you could use it in its form of sadness, because you know that why are you sad now? Because it'll make you happy in a day from now.
Years ago, I was given some advice that I have followed rigorously through my life. And that is that when you're faced with something that could have negative consequences. Expect the worst. You're never disappointed if you expect the worst.
Okay.
And it also puts you in a position of saying, what do I do to fix this?
Okay.
So, but if the worst doesn't come, you can be overjoyed. Is that at a very basic level something similar to what we're talking about here now?
Okay. So if you're the type of person that walk into everything with expectations, positive expectations, and you're always disappointed and therefore always end up sad,
Yeah.
then you need to figure out a way to be happy. And if the way for that is to employ the negative emotion in order to get you to that place, that would be the perfect example where you're employing a negative emotion to get to the happy emotion. Now, there are other ways of getting to that happiness that may be a little more difficult and may need time for you to first get used to overcoming that initial disappointment every time to get there. But in the meantime, if the only way you see possible to become happy is by first being sad, like they say, so mourning. Why do we sit shiva? We sit shiva. I shouldn't say why we sit shiva. One of the benefits of sitting shiva is that if you don't mourn in an expressive way and you just hold everything inside, then what's going to happen is you're going to explode, or it's going to come out at all the wrong times for who knows how long. If you let it out, if you express it and experience it in 7 days, then you're more likely to move on. Again, not move past, not forget, but continue living your life in a positive way, right? So the same thing here. If today they say, people have to, when you experience trauma or things and you live life like that, when you want to get better, the first thing you have to do is mourn the person you were. If you want to become someone else, yeah, that's a very sad, that could be very almost depressing. But if that's the only way to get forward, then that becomes part of the service of God. That becomes part of becoming happy. That becomes fused with happiness. If it doesn't lead to happiness, then you got to find a different path. But if that makes you happy, by all means. Now, again, would I recommend sticking to it or finding other ways that would maybe be less, as a religious person, there's a much easier way of getting to that conclusion, and that is by recognizing that you don't control everything or you don't control anything. And therefore, just like you don't expect everything to be good, you shouldn't expect everything to be bad or nothing to work out. Expect that you don't know what you're doing, that you don't know what's good for you. God knows what's good for you. If God's in charge, God will take care of you. Therefore, everything that happens to you is ultimately good for you. So now you have no reason to be sad, even if something bad happens to you, right? So there are many different ways you can take that may make you less or more happy in the meantime. But as long as it leads to something positive, that's exactly the point. Yeah.
Is happy and joy synonymous?
Let's see. It's 9 chapters. It'll take us 9 chapters to fully understand. Joy and happiness does not mean that I'm dancing or that I'm not thinking about my worries or that I'm delusional. It means a true inner joy and peace and happiness. But it's 9 chapters. It'll take us time to get there, to fully understand it and appreciate it. So the wording, there will be profit, this is, here it's the second to last paragraph on page 352, implies that on the contrary, the sadness itself has no virtue, except that some profit will ultimately be derived from it. This profit, so what's the profit that can be derived from sadness, is the true joy in God, which follows the true, in other words, justified sadness over one's sins, with bitterness of soul and a broken heart, which must come at specific suitable times. Very interesting, right? So the Alter Rebbe is saying the only way to get to true happiness, true joy with God, is to experience true bitterness over your own past, your own mistakes. But first of all, it has to be justified. In other words, it can't be a depression about your past. It has to be a sadness that will lead you to joy. It also has to be at specific suitable times. In other words, it has to be controlled. Why should this sadness lead to the worshiper to joy? For thereby, through one sadness, the spirit of impurity and of the Sitra Achra is broken. And so too the iron wall that separates him from his Father in heaven. As the Zohar comments on the verse, a broken spirit, a broken heart, you will not despise. And then the preceding verse will be fulfilled for him. Make me hear joy and gladness. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and support me with your generous spirit. Yeah. So
It's actually another interesting distinction in translation. Rather than make me hear joy and gladness. This is translated as let me hear joy and gladness.
So
the make is more forced, and this is more sort of kumbaya.
right. In other words, yeah, but let can also be release.
Could it be more loud?
Like, but not allow in that till now you're not allowed to. Now I'm letting you, but now I'm releasing it, and now it's flowing towards you. In other words, if a child is always unhappy because his parents are always telling him what to do, yeah. So one parenting technique, which isn't parenting, is to stop telling the child what to do. Yeah. But what's the other thing you can do? Is you can teach the child that if he starts doing what he's supposed to be doing, you wouldn't tell him what to do. In other words, if the child did what they were supposed to do, what they know they're supposed to do, then you would, instead of telling him before he did it to do it, you would be, and then after he does it, you don't feel like saying thank you, because what do you mean? You know how many times I have to tell you to do it? Why should I thank you for doing it? Or you could do it, and then instead of not only the parent won't tell you what to do, the parent will actually be proud of you and gloat with you that you actually did it. And that will that make you happy? Well, in a sense, it'll let you be happy. But it will make you happy too. Anyhow, this is a much older translation. This is a translation from the 60s. So you have to know exactly what type of how these nuances were being understood then to see if it's a difference in opinion of how to translate the verse. But
what is the Hebrew?
Tashmieni, I think it's more forceful, more make.
More make?
No.
Sham?
No. Shema means like here, right? But the Tashmieni is what's the make me. Let me see how he translates. This is in Psalm 51. This is where it's taken from. Let's see if every translation is going to be different.
Well,
Just warning you.
Translations are always different. Exactly,
that's the point. So this was written by two different people, so the translation will be different. Let's just see how he translates Atil and how they translate this in here, and maybe we'll look at one more place. Let's see.
51:19, verse 19.
Make me hear joy and gladness.
That's what it says here, make.
No, he knows. He heard me. I have the same thing. He's reading a different translation. That's why
Oh, okay.
mentioned it.
That's a different translation.
And let's see how the Siddur, how he translates it
Well,
here.
it really doesn't make with the letter allow. It goes, it's here.
Huh?
You shall hear, right? Or me, I will hear.
Right. But it's not Eshma, I will hear. It's Tashmiyin, I will be made to hear. Almost
as if it's setting a table for you to believe.
exactly. So it's not forcing it upon you, but in other words, by default, we're happy. Look at a baby. So it's not that it's being forced upon us. It's just when we remove all the blockage, then it comes pouncing back.
So it's more of a constructive process than a passive process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense, actually.
Let me just see how he translates it here. It's probably making it also because that's just tashmieni. That's what it means. So, let's just see.
Do a hearing of it to me.
No. So here it says, "Let me hear tidings of joy and gladness. Then the bones which you have shattered will rejoice." I don't know.
So that's Latin, yeah. So it's a different version.
Depends when it was translated.
Right.
And who did the translation?
Right. So all these three are published by the same thing, but they're all different translators.
Yeah.
The idea is the same.
Idea is the same. Yeah.
The idea is different.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting distinction.
You say what's an active versus a passive.
Right. But I think even the make is not as active as we. It's not active in other words, it's not active in the sense that because King David's talking to God, so King David's not telling God that I don't possess happiness. When I will be broken, then you will give me happiness. It's like a contribution. It's more that when he breaks away all of the sins of the past, when he breaks away all the negative feelings, then now he's attributing it all to God because God created him. God gave him everything to begin with. So technically it is God giving it to him and God making him happy. But it's more in the passive way, although it is an active thing. Tashmieni is active, make me hear. But it's not as active as me giving you something that you didn't possess beforehand, I guess.
So I find myself thinking about my family was at our house for a family reunion, and there was so much activity and enthusiasm, and it was like there was joy, but you really, unless you really focused on it, you like it was just a bunch of chatter and loud noises, but by making you hear it, you see it in a different sense. Instead of just being activity around you that just is kind of overpowering you, if God helps you hear it by making you hear it, you have a different sense of joyfulness.
How would you say most people experience, either become happy or experience happiness today? Or think about experiencing or becoming happy? Now that's a very vague. I'm not going to get the answer I'm looking for. So that's too broad of a question. I think most people have this image of happiness as something external. If I had enough money, I'd be happy. If I had a good spouse, a loving spouse, I'd be happy. If my kids were just this, if my boss was just that, if the world was just this, if my friends were just this, or even if I was just this, it's a lot of happiness revolves in our minds around things, externalities. You know what? There's a word ivdu. We quoted a verse before. Ivdu et Hashem bisimcha. Serve God with joy. Bisimcha. Those letters, 5 letters. Bisimcha. Right. Bet samach mem chet hey are the same letters as the word machshava. What's machshava? Thought. Very good. Thought. Your thoughts, not your mind, right? That's seichel. That's different. But the garment of thought is the same Hebrew letters as with joy. You want to become happy, and it's in the way you think. It begins and ends there, because you can have all the money in the world and you won't be happy, and you can have nothing and you'll be happy, right? There was this wealthy person that took his son to some faraway African country to do some charitable work, and he wanted his son to appreciate how wealthy, how rich they were. So he was showing him and pointing out other people there didn't have a bathroom in their house, they didn't have running water, and they didn't have a stove. Everything they did, they had to do for themselves. They had to hunt. They had to everything And this was supposed to elicit by the child this appreciation for the wealth that they possessed back home. So after they get back home, the parent, this father asks his child, "No, so what did you learn on this trip?" So the child said, "Well, I learned that the people in Africa, they don't have all the things you wanted me to see that they don't have. But what I also learned was that they have family, they have happiness, they have time that they spend with each other. They're able to do what they want, not what they're told to do." You know what that I realized? How poor we really are. Yeah. In other words, there's joy begins and ends in the mind. There are people that walk out of the biggest tragedies, the happiest people in the world, and there are people that experience life and they're depressed to the point where they want to take their life. That's a tragedy. But the only way to fix that is to change the way we think. So yes, it's not about putting yourself, now, part of the way you think is by putting yourself around things that force you to think like that, right? So if you put yourself around sad and depressed people, you're going to think along those lines. If you put yourself around happy people, that may be an external thing that will cause you. Now, if you have a lot of money, it may be easier. Well, not easier. It may be easier to think happy thoughts and to be happy, but there's no guarantee. That's not what gives you. It may just allow you the time to think your way to happiness, but it's not going to make you happy. So there is truth to what what you were saying. I want to just advance another thought here. So let's use the term sadness. So being sad is we see being sad could lead to happiness, but why does it need to lead to happiness? Why do we need to be sad in order to be happy? Wouldn't it be better to try at all costs to avoid sadness if the end game is to be happy? In other words, if you have an option, do you want to be born rich or do you want to be born poor and become rich? Or even if you're not born, let's say you're born, do you want to experience poverty and then experience wealth? Or do you want to experience negativity and then experience, or do you want to just, why should I experience all of those things first? So in a way, you don't want to experience those things. But if you do, it will make you better. It will allow you to appreciate the wealth more. And wealth doesn't necessarily mean money. It means in anything. What, right? Wealth can mean family, in just learning and experiencing and observing. King Solomon said, "I saw that there is an advantage to wisdom from foolishness, like the advantage of light from darkness." The commentaries all have a field day with this verse. And this is what makes Solomon smart, right? That he sees that it's more beneficial to be wise than dumb, and it's more light is better than darkness. I mean, this is genius, brilliant stuff. What is earth-shattering? Why is this verse attributed to King Solomon? What is Solomon-like about this verse? Yeah. So the commentaries explain that it doesn't say, King Solomon didn't say, "I see that there's an advantage of wisdom over Yisron l'chachma al hasichlut," over foolishness. It says, "I see that there's advantage to wisdom that from foolishness." There's an advantage to light from darkness. You could be in a very bright room and you don't realize how bright it is until you're in a less bright room. The Rebbe once spoke about, and I don't understand this, but Roger can maybe fill us in. The Rebbe once spoke about photographers and painters. They paint and take pictures. The Rebbe spoke, I think, more about painters, but I think it's the photographers too. They won't take a picture of light if there's no shadow. Honestly, they won't. You want shadow, right? The shadow helps to, I guess, make the light more realistic, or whichever word you would use. It brings out, so it's not that there's an advantage of light over darkness. No photographer would take a picture of shadows, right? Or maybe you would if the shadow, but
Yeah, they do.
Right. But how do you see the shadow? You take through the light, but the shadow, so every person understands light is more advantageous than darkness. But King Solomon says, Ra'isi, I saw sheyesh yitron. There's an advantage when the light is from the darkness. So everyone knows light is better. I mean, darkness isn't bad, but light is better than darkness. But I found that there's an advantage to seeing light from the darkness, to seeing light compared to the darkness. Just that was the metaphor. What was the conclusion of King Solomon? That there is an advantage of wisdom that comes from foolishness. In other words, when you take something that seems foolish, or when a foolish person says something smart, you listen twice, right? When a smart person says something smart, it's part of the thing. But when you see someone you don't expect it to come out of his mouth, now you're thinking, right? That catches you because you don't expect it.
All this almost sounds like you can't have true joy and happiness without sadness.
I didn't say that. All I said was, if you had sadness first, that whatever true joy you're experiencing will be a lot more, will have an advantage. Let's put it that way. Okay? You can be married and in love and really experience true love. But when you go through a difficult time and remain or rebuild that love, no one's saying that the first love wasn't true love, but how do you define that? How do you define, was I happy? But it'll be a lot more solid. It'll have a lot more reliability to it. There is an advantage. Again, we're not saying something's better or worse or higher or lower it's all subjective, right? But there is an advantage. There's an advantage of light from darkness. So, why is the happiest holiday of the biblical holidays Sukkot and not Pesach? Because it comes right after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the serious times. Why does it say in the Talmud there was never a joyous day in the Jewish calendar like? No. It says there are... No. The 15th day of Av. The Talmud says there was never a joyful day in Israel like the 15th day of Av. What? It says nowhere in the Torah does it speak about what was so happy about that day. So it mentions it nowhere. The Talmud speaks about why it was a happy day, but why is that the happiest day of the year? Why not make Simchas Torah the happiest day of the year? Because it comes right after Tisha B'Av, the saddest day of the year. Right? Why is Purim the happiest festival? Because what happened before that? Hanukkah, they were trying to, so it was a spiritual decree. Purim, they were trying to kill each and every one of us. Regardless of how observant, religious, or godly you were a Jew, you were going to be killed. So we see that if you want to get to the deepest place of light, of wisdom, whatever you want to experience, even if you don't experience the opposite first, know enough about it as if you've experienced it. But nothing trumps experience. Now, you can't force yourself to experience it, right? You want to be joyful. You can't go and bring a tragedy upon you. You're not allowed to do that, right? But if, God forbid, you do experience tragedy, know that you can only come out bigger and better from it and because of it. So, again, the Alter Rebbe started by saying we need to be happy. If the sadness will lead to happiness, that's okay. But the Torah speaks about sad times. We mourn. Why do we have to be sad at certain times? Why do we have to be solemn in certain occasions? Because that's the only way you'll be able to experience a much deeper level of joy. Okay, let's read a few more lines and then we'll pause for the week. This is the last paragraph from page 353. This is the simple reason. In other words, apart from the deeper mystical ones, for the practice instituted by the Arizal, the Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, of reciting this psalm, Psalm 51, that we quoted this verse of "Make me hear joy and gladness," containing the verses quoted above after Tikkun Chatzot, the midnight prayer, before resuming one's Torah study. So we say it every night during the midnight, during the bedtime Shema. But those who would wake up, had the custom to wake up at midnight to mourn the destruction of the temple, and then they would stay up for the rest of the night and study. After the morning, they would recite this psalm before resuming the Torah study. Why? In order that one should study with the true joy in God that succeeds the remorse of Tikkun Chatzot. In other words, when a person wakes up in the middle of the night to mourn the destruction of the temple, they're in a mourning state. The default is they're going to learn Torah, but they're going to be in a mourning state, right? A sad state. The Arizal said, no. There's a time and place for everything. There's a time to mourn. But before you transition from that, remind yourself why you mourned, that it was all in order to come out of it happier than you were before. It's all in order to bring about a joy. Such joy is of greater quality than joy which is not preceded by sadness, similar to the distinctive quality of light, which follows darkness. As the Zohar comments on the verse, and I, King Solomon, saw that wisdom surpasses foolishness as light surpasses darkness. Note there, and this will suffice for him who understands. You know, the Alter Rebbe doesn't explain this metaphor, but I think we understand exactly what it says. Furthermore, the verse states explicitly, because you did not serve God your Lord with joy. This is the punishment described in the ensuing verse will be administered God. This is in Deuteronomy where Moses lists 98 curses that will come to the Jewish people. Why will all these curses come upon us? Not because we didn't listen to God or do his Torah or do mitzvahs. It doesn't say that. Why? It says because you didn't serve God with joy. In other words, Moses doesn't say that you're going to get these curses because you didn't serve God. It says because you didn't serve God with joy. And everyone is familiar with the explanation of the Arizal on this verse, which is what I just explained. That it's not, the punishments don't come. The tragedy doesn't come because we don't serve God. The tragedy comes because we don't serve God with joy. Why is it such a tragedy not to serve God with joy? Because if you don't serve God with joy, then there's no guarantee you're going to serve God, right? Because then you're lazy. Then you're not going to fight the evil inclination as you may need to. He may smell blood. If he smells blood, there's no telling what he'll come and do. I'll just conclude with a story. There was a rabbi in Flatbush, I think somewhere in New York City, I think Flatbush. A very well-known rabbi, not a Chabad chassid, but became a very, very close and considered himself a follower of the Rebbe. And he was once asked what brought him to Lubavitch, to the Rebbe. So he said, actually, he once came in, he heard a lot about the Rebbe, and he never interested him. And then one day he decided, let me come and see what this is all about. And he came to a Farbrengen, a Hasidic gathering where the Rebbe spoke. And when he walked in, he was listening, and then the Rebbe said a joke, like something funny, and everyone laughed. And that turned him off, because the sort of the image we have of what a serious rabbi should be is serious, not joking and not making people laugh, right? So he left with the intention of not coming back. A number of years later, he met a girl from his community that left the observant way of life. And a couple years later, she came back. She came back home and readopted an observant lifestyle. And one day he asked her, what led to this? Well, what happened? So she said, she grew up in a religious home, and everything was, being forced upon her. It was just all done in such a dry, emotionless way. She really was looking for happiness, and she just couldn't see it. So she left. And then one day, she was, for whatever reason, she ended up by the Rebbe's Farbrengen. She ended up by a Hasidic gathering. And the Rebbe was speaking. And the Rebbe said something funny that caused everyone, she didn't understand, that caused everyone to laugh. And she said, there may be some joy here after all. This led to the rabbi's curiosity, right? And he figured out that it was the same day he was there. And he concluded, he was saying this, and he was saying that what's amazing to him is not that what he thought was a negative turned out to be a positive, or that the Rebbe did it knowing or not knowing that this would bring a girl back to Yiddishkeit. What was amazing was that if he would have been captivated by the Rebbe at that first Farbrengen, so he would have come, he would have felt like it's, he's coming, he's enamored, he's captivated, fine, but it would have been like a smooth process. But because he came and was turned off. But then the thing that turned him off turned out to be the same thing that blew his mind. That changed his whole perspective. In other words, it could have taken one path, and he felt it took a much more beautiful, much more wholesome path because of the fact that it was broken up like that. Again, we don't know the ways of God. We don't understand why some people actually have to experience the negative in order to come to the positive, or experience it in the extremes in which they experience it, or why we were chosen to fall into this group or that group. We don't understand that. We never will. And really, there's no reason to. But we know that any type of negative situation we are thrust into, not that we put upon ourselves, but that we were placed into, the only benefit, the only way that could be, the only possibility could be that something much more beautiful will come on after it. And so when you experience that sadness, knowing this is only the stepping stool towards the joy, then it's a whole different ballgame, a whole different reality. Okay, I'm going to pause the.
Back in 2017.